VISCO can run on its own, although the vast majority of VISCO users will run VISCO integrated with QuickBooks. And it really integrates with any version of QuickBooks 2003 or later, so that includes QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Pro, Enterprise, or the Professional series. So any of the versions of QuickBooks will work with it, and it really doesn't matter whether you're using VISCO in the cloud or you actually have VISCO installed on your own network. It'll work either way. The integrations, the way they're set up, are a little bit different depending on your specific configuration, but really the important thing to understand is that VISCO will be integrated with QuickBooks regardless of where QuickBooks is hosted and regardless of where VISCO is hosted. The integration itself is actually pretty simple. There are 4 points of integration, and we'll walk through each of them. Let's start in the Sales and Purchases menu and go into Customers. And I'm just going to pull up a customer as an example here. So if we look at this Three Brothers customer, for example, the accounting key is the customer name as it appears in QuickBooks. Now, you really should never have to modify that in any way. In fact, initially, when you first get started on VISCO, we'll take your lists from QuickBooks, like your customer list, your vendor list, your item list, all those, and we'll upload them into VISCO. And really from that point on, if you need to add new customers, you need to make changes to existing customers, that's all done directly in VISCO, and then QuickBooks gets updated automatically. So what happens is, once I click update, let's say I were to change the address here and click update, it'll go check QuickBooks to see if that customer exists in QuickBooks, and if it does, it'll make the change there. If that customer does not exist in QuickBooks, then it will create that customer for you in QuickBooks. The same is true on the vendor side. So let's go into Vendors, Edit Vendor, and you'll see that same field exists here. We call it Accounting Key. And that is the way the vendor name appears in QuickBooks. Again, you don't have to modify it in any way here in VISCO. It gets uploaded initially from your lists in QuickBooks, and then from that point on, adding new vendors and making changes to existing vendors is all done only in VISCO, and then QuickBooks gets updated automatically. So pretty simple. I mean, those two things are really simple. We call them the customer and vendor validations, basically. Then the question is, what else goes into QuickBooks? So all the order entry work, creating sales orders, creating purchase orders, creating containers, managing inventory, shipping out sales orders, really all the way up to the point of invoicing is all done in VISCO. And it's after the point of invoicing that it gets sent over to QuickBooks. So the invoices themselves, you can, as I said, you create them here in VISCO, you make changes to them here in VISCO in the invoice maintenance section. So if you need to change a price or you need to change a quantity or something, that's all done here in VISCO. And then once you're ready to send it into QuickBooks, you would come into here into this post invoices in batch. This is the way it's done most often. You've got a list of all the invoices that have a pending status. Pending meaning it has not yet gone to QuickBooks. And you can check them off individually. Check, 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 check. Or you say select all and then post. So I'll just do one. I'll select one, post, and that's it. So from that point on, VISCO is now done with that invoice. When you're ready to receive in payment, that will be done directly in QuickBooks. If you want to run accounts receivable aging reports, that will be done directly in QuickBooks. At that point, VISCO no longer knows anything more about that invoice. Everything from that point on is handled directly in QuickBooks. Now, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that VISCO knows nothing more about it, because you can, in fact, go into, say, a customer record in VISCO and pull up that customer's open balance, which would show you anything they have open in QuickBooks. So it does query QuickBooks at that point, so you can check a customer's open balance. And the same is true when an order goes in. A sales order is being entered, the system will assuming that you have credit limits set up for each customer, then when the order is entered, that order will check QuickBooks, check the customer's open balance, and if this order is going to put them over their credit limit, then the system returns an error, we'll call it a warning message back to the user that says this order is going to go bring that customer past their limit. But that's on the receivable side, and there's also an integration on the payable side. And actually, before we go into actually the entering of the bill, let's look at the tools and accounting/system administration to understand how the mapping between VISCO and QuickBooks works. There's this accounting interface settings here. Really, as a user, you shouldn't have to mess with this at all, but this is where you can turn your integration on or off. If for some reason you want to turn it off, you can. Probably the more important thing here are the cost type code, what we call cost type code maintenance. So this is where you're managing all the types of costs that you want to enter in VISCO. So when we talk about those types of costs, they're typically the costs of goods sold, or any cost that you would consider part of your cost of goods sold would be entered in VISCO. And each one of those cost types is mapped to a general ledger account, most likely a cost of goods sold account in QuickBooks. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one, meaning if you wanted to have more than one cost type in VISCO, okay, let's say you have outbound freight and inbound freight. You want to keep track of those as two separate things in VISCO. You can, but you can have them both mapped to a single cost of goods sold account in QuickBooks, like freight, for example. So you can get more granular if you want to. The other thing that's probably relevant or important to understand about setting up the cost types in VISCO is this field here where it says inventoriable. What this means is when costs of this type are being entered, should those costs be included in the inventory value calculation or not? So some companies may say, we consider the value of our inventory what we pay for the product itself, meaning the cost of the product itself. And that's it. And that's perfectly fine. But other companies might say that, you know, they consider their inventory value as the cost that they paid for the product, plus the cost of freight to bring it here, plus the storage that it costs to keep it, and various other things, custom broker fees, all the other costs that go into it, they consider part of the inventory value. So that's what this inventoriable yes/no refers to. Those are the most relevant settings here when you're setting up the mapping of cost types between VISCO and QuickBooks. There's also something similar on the sales side. You can set up mapping for miscellaneous charge types. So there's a default sales account that sales are going to post to, but you can, just for product sales, but also you can tack on extra charges onto an invoice, and each one of those extra charges, or what we call miscellaneous charges, is also mapped to a general ledger account in QuickBooks. So that is where that mapping is set up. Now let's go into the finances section, and we're going to go into the accounts payable and cost entry. So this would be a listing of costs that have already been entered but have not yet posted to QuickBooks. I'm going to create a new batch, so these can be entered in batches. I'm just going to enter one single voucher or one bill and post that over. So this would be the entry date, or a better explanation for that would be the invoice date, the vendor's invoice date. So this would be when we're entering a bill. We'll choose who that vendor is. Let's choose a freight carrier, River City, that vendor's invoice number, and then the amount of the invoice. Let's say it's $1,000 US. You can enter costs in other currencies as well, and those get posted to QuickBooks in the foreign currency. Not every version of QuickBooks allows you to have foreign currencies, but I think from 2014 or so on, all the US-based versions of QuickBooks allow for foreign currencies. So that's you're choosing the amount, the currency, and then you're going to say edit costs. So here's where you choose what type of cost it is, and this is that same list that we were looking at before, where each one of these cost types, again, is mapped to a cost of goods sold account in QuickBooks. Let's say ocean freight, $1,000, and then we're going to choose how that cost should be applied. So if it's storage cost, you might want to apply it to a warehouse, then every lot or everything sitting in that warehouse will pick up a portion of that storage cost. In this case, it was ocean freight, so we're going to apply this to a container, and I'm actually going to pick a container that has many items on it, or at least more than one. Let's see. Okay, so no, that one's not actually received yet. It's in transit. Okay, so let's pick this one for example. So this container actually has two different items on it, pretzels and hay. It's a $1,000 charge. Now I'm going to decide how I want to distribute that cost across all the items in the container. So we could distribute it by weight, meaning whatever weighs more in the container gets more of the cost. We could distribute it by quantity. We have an option to distribute it by volume or by CBM, so whatever is taking up more space in the container takes on more of the cost. Let's say in this case I'm going to do it by quantity. I'll click recalculate, and it takes 1,000. No, let me pick a better container that's not that all or nothing, because that doesn't make as much sense. Let's pick this one. So actually this is a couple different, there's a 2010 and a 2011 Merlot. Same thing, $1,000. I'm going to distribute it by quantity. Okay, this is better. So now when we recalculate, it's taking $666 of the 1,000 and applying it to this particular wine, and 333 of it and applying it to this one because there's more of this wine in the container, so it's taking on more of the cost. Just to note too, there's a section here for accrued. If you had entered an estimated freight amount at the container level, then it would indicate what the estimated amount was, and if the cost you were entering was higher than the estimated amount, then you would have to check off the fact that you're accepting. Well, the system gives you a warning basically to let you know, hey, you're paying more than you expected, and you'd have to check off this checkbox and say you're accepting the fact that you're overpaying or paying more than you expected. So I'm going to click done, and here's where the other integration with QuickBooks comes into play. So this is a list of batches that have not yet posted. When I click that post button, that creates the bills in QuickBooks, and it also generates this report here, which is just kind of summary of where it's posted, what specific accounts we're posting to, and what bills are being created in QuickBooks. So again, from that point on, if you want to make payment, that's done directly in QuickBooks. Accounts payable aging will be done in QuickBooks. Financial statements, that's all done directly in your accounting system.